Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Look Into Bitcoin, and today we're going to be looking at Hyperbitcoinization. To do this, we'll be using a number of resources that are all freely available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. So, what is Hyperbitcoinization? Well, right now we'll just focus on the current models we have for potentially predicting the future price points of Bitcoin, such as the rainbow price chart indicator, which is suggesting a Bitcoin price peak of currently around $335,000. But remember, this is constantly increasing, so in the future this will increase rather substantially. So this is a rather large potential price prediction for Bitcoin. We could, of course, go to other metrics such as the stock to flow model, which is predicting even higher potential price peaks for Bitcoin. Price peaks as soon as the next couple years, with prices exceeding $500,000. Of course, this is maybe a little optimistic, but hyper-Bitcoinization is the theoretical point at which Bitcoin becomes the global financial currency, and it backs all financial transactions around the world throughout all economies. And at this theoretical point, Bitcoin at $500,000 becoming the value point of all financial transactions and the valuation model throughout every asset on Earth. Maybe $500,000 is a little bit pessimistic. Maybe if hyper-Bitcoinization is actually accomplished, we could go even higher. There's some social media tweets like this one where people are potentially betting on $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days, so maybe this one was a little bit optimistic. But realistically, if we were to see hyper-Bitcoinization, if we were to see Bitcoin as the global financial currency and the value point for all assets on Earth, realistically, how high could we go? So if we just go ahead to TradingView quick, I've just loaded up the Bitcoin logarithmic growth curves. Now these are a little outdated as Bitcoin has spent a substantial amount of time beneath these log curves, but when this indicator was first actually coined and created, Bitcoin was within these curves and it was predicting the Bitcoin price to continue increasing, not exponentially at a somewhat predictable but rather rapid rate to the upside, and this hasn't actually held true yet. However, I'm not ruling out that we couldn't regain price and come back into these logarithmic growth curves. But if Bitcoin was to accomplish hyper-Bitcoinization, we likely wouldn't reach prices as predicted by the rainbow price chart indicator of $350,000, maybe $400,000. Similar prices here for the logarithmic growth curves predicting prices of $200,000 to within a few years just $500,000, which actually lines up with the stock to flow price prediction models of Bitcoin being at around $500,000 within the next few years. If hyper-Bitcoinization is to be achieved, we're going to suck up all of the value throughout all global commodities, assets, fiat currencies, and everything to become the global currency standard. What price would Bitcoin be at that point? What we can do initially is look is if Bitcoin absorbed all of the M1 money supply, so all of the flowing currency throughout the US economy, and divide that figure by the Bitcoin supply, we'd get a Bitcoin price of almost exactly $1 million. Not far off that tweet prediction, actually, although we probably won't reach this price in the next few weeks. This is certainly not a bad price to start when we theorize about hyper-Bitcoinization. $1 million per Bitcoin doesn't sound too bad to me either. But this is only taking into account the current money flow within the US economy. Within hyper-Bitcoinization, we have to take into account not only cash that's currently free flowing throughout economies, but we also need to take into account cash equivalents such as short-term bonds. And we can't just take into account the US economy. We need to take into account all global economies. So $1 million is really just our starting point for this price prediction. Here, what we can do on TradingView is add together the M2 money supply of the US, China, and Europe, the three biggest markets and the three biggest influential economies when it comes to the Bitcoin price. And once we've collated all of those figures, divide that by the Bitcoin supply. And once we do that, we get this astronomical figure of $16 million per Bitcoin. Now you have to keep in mind that at this theoretical point of hyper-Bitcoinization, it doesn't really make sense to divide Bitcoin's price by the US dollar equivalent because we wouldn't be on the US dollar standard. So we probably wouldn't measure Bitcoin in US dollar terms. Bitcoin would be the unit of measurement. Everything would be valued against Bitcoin. And at that point, $16 million per Bitcoin is a pretty substantial amount. We probably wouldn't even be measuring things in Bitcoin. We'd be measuring them in Satoshis. So what would one Satoshi be worth at this price point? So each Bitcoin can be divided into what are called Satoshis, which is 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. we're reaching 16 cents per Satoshi. But remember, this is only taking into account 3 economies in the M2 money supply. If we take into account all global assets collated, the value would be significantly higher. Hyperbitcoinization would probably take a Satoshi value in today's US dollar terms to potentially 50 cents or even $1, at which point Bitcoin would be worth tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in today's terms. But is that likely? Probably not. I am, of course, a big fan in Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, the technology behind them, and of course, the price increases that we can see. But ultimately, becoming the global standard may happen, but we have to be pretty open-minded for that potential outcome. And if it were to happen, it certainly isn't going to be happening in the next few weeks. This is something that might take place over the next few decades or maybe even a century. So just to summarize, hyperbitcoinization is a term used to describe the potential future point at which Bitcoin would become the default system of value globally. So instead of going to the shop to buy your coffee in the morning with US dollars, Great British pounds, Chinese yuan, you'd be using Satoshis. And it's impossible to accurately theorize what the price of Bitcoin may be at such a point in fiat or other traditional terms, and realistically it wouldn't matter anyway. Because as we said, Bitcoin would be the default value term. But we can't speculate that leading up to that point, it would be at least $1 million. But like we said, this could far exceed 10 million, if not $100 million potentially. Hyperbitcoinization, though, is unlikely to occur in the near future. But realistically, anything is possible. We have to be open to anything. Maybe I'm being a little bit too bearish with this opinion. Bitcoin is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and especially with the global economies and uncertainties, who knows? Anything really could happen. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to live chats, in-depth newsletters, indicator alerts, private TradingView scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know in the comments down below, do you think hyperbitcoinization is a possibility? If so, at what price do you think Bitcoin could potentially top out in today's terms, of course? Let me know in the comments down below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.